Hi guys, it's Kelly here and I'm back with another video. Today's video is featuring a new to me stamp company. This is from Pawsome Stamps. This is part of their February release. I am using the Loving Thoughts, the Eggceptional, and then I'm using an older set that she also sent me called Happy Easter. And today we are going to be doing something that I have deemed speckled painting. Speckled distressing painting. So basically here's the idea behind this. I'm working on Canson watercolor paper. I prefer the Monteval, that's the one that I use. And because I buy it in larger sheets because it's cheaper, and you guys know I'm a cheap chicken, I always end up with these kind of like little leftover pieces that are not enough to do card front. But so I thought that they would be fun to do kind of like this speckled Easter egg look, which would be super fun. And then once I did it, I thought that it was like super cute and I figured I could make another card out of it. And that's why I use the florals, just because I think it's a super fun kind of whimsical look. It might not be for everybody, but that's okay. I think it's a lot of fun to do. So basically what I'm doing here is I wanted to do a rainbow of Easter eggs. And so I just picked out a couple of scrap pieces and I am applying my distressing to them with my ink blenders. Something to note here, because watercolor paper is made to resist water so that it sits on the surface a little bit longer, that also means that your inks don't absorb in right away. So this means two things. One, it's easier to blend your colors on watercolor paper because they're sitting on the surface. So if you're working quickly before they dry, they're much easier to blend together. But also it means it's more prone to fingerprints because it is sitting on the surface and it's not completely dry. So just a couple of things to take into account when you're doing your blending on watercolor paper. You could totally do this technique on regular cardstock. I do that frequently, like with the types of things we're going to be doing to create this kind of speckled look. But I chose the watercolor cardstock because I wasn't sure all of the things I was going to be doing. So basically, I just wanted to have it there in case I needed it. So here, this is my second piece, and I'm going through and the first one led off at the green, so I picked up at the green and then continued it out to the purple, and then I had a little bit of room left at the end, so I just brought that pink that I started with back in. You certainly could do a more traditional rainbow, but I prefer picked raspberry to red. So now we are on to the fun part. So to start my little speckled look, I am first going to splatter on just some clean water. And because I am working with the distress inks that respond to water, I'm going to be able to lift up some color, which is going to give my speckles a little bit more interest. The longer you let it sit, the more pigment that you will pick up. And especially with it being watercolor paper, you can remove quite a bit of it, so it almost looks white. And you can do this as much or as little as you like, or not at all. The next thing I'm going to do is add some shimmer. I'm going to be doing that with Perfect Pearls in the color Perfect Pearl, so it's just like the white version. And this, I'm just going to combine with a little bit of water to get it to a consistency where I can kind of splatter it on. You guys have seen me do both of these things on a multitude of backgrounds for my cards, which is how I know it works on regular cardstock. It does not require watercolor cardstock to do this. And then this is just going to add some shine. You can also do this if you don't have Perfect Pearls. Hero Art, Altenew, those are the first two that come to mind that have like a shimmer spray. You could do it with those as well. Now, for the speckly part, we're actually going to, you can use a, craft mat or whatever you have. I have my glass mat. If you're interested in a glass mat, there's a coupon code for 20% off in the description below. But I'm going to use that, and I just smeared a little bit of my distress ink, the same colors that I used in my rainbow, onto my glass mat, and now I am adding just a little bit of water to each of them and spattering them on. I am not going like color to color, like green over green, blue over blue. I am spattering them all over everything because I think it gives the most interesting look. So you could definitely kind of take this up a notch and make it a little bit more elegant because I have used this in like my no-line watercoloring pieces and things like that, if you like a little bit of a messier look. But I think that the colors on top of each other look super cool. So here is where I decided now I'm going to do the flower. But for the flower, I wanted to be able to control a little bit where the color was, not the spattering, because I don't really think there's a good way to control that, but the actual ink blending application. And so this is another piece of watercolor paper. I am stamping first this time. You can stamp first or do your background and then stamp second. It doesn't make a difference. I did it both ways, and both ways was fine. And then so now for this one, I am using my brushes. And you're going to be able to see here, like as I start building up the color, what I mean when I say that the color sits on top and it moves quite a bit. So I started in with my yellow centers, and then I went to the green leaves. These have two different types of leaves drawn into them, and if I was coloring them with like just with Copics, I probably would have done them two different colors, but because I was ink blending, there was no way I was trying to make them look any different. And so then for my flower, I'm going to do some pink. Watch the leaves. So there's green already on them, right? And so you would think they would just layer on top of the green and make brown. But because the pigment sits on top of the watercolor paper for so long, I'm actually like pushing the green out and turning the leaves pink. Which is super fascinating, and probably there's some really cool way to use that for a separate technique, but I don't know what it is yet. I'll do some thinking about it and come back. So then I went in with the pink, which basically almost all but removed my yellow centers, if you noticed. I decided to go in and add a little bit of blue. I thought about doing the purple, and then I was like, well, if I add blue, I'll have a little bit of blue, and then the pink will make purple, and I'll be able to get a lot more color variation. So I wanted it to be more pink than purple. So I am going back in there with my pink, and then I will go back in again with the yellow because now I've completely lost that. It's just gone. It's disappeared. And then once this is done, I'm going to do the same thing that I did to my backgrounds where I'm going to stamp and cut my eggs. So I did the clean water, and for this one I ended up actually doing it twice, just to get a little bit more variation. I wasn't happy with how much I had the first time around. And then I'm going to do the same thing, the perfect pearls, and then go in and do the color spatters. Because of the way that I chose to color this one, and you'll see what I mean here in a minute, not all the colors are as apparent as they are in the eggs, but I do believe that they are there enough to make it worth doing. So just, I mean, you'll have to kind of play it by ear as you play around with this, if this is even for you. I think it's a ton of fun. When Julianne had reached out to me, I had seen the company like kind of on Instagram and stuff, but I wasn't super familiar with what they created. And she very generously reached out to me and asked me if I would be interested in participating in their February release. And so I took a more in-depth look at the stamps that they created. And to me, now if you guys have been following me for years, this will not surprise you. To me, it is very reminiscent of more of like a Neat and Tangled kind of style. And Neat and Tangled went out of business. Danielle chose to shut that down around the time the pandemic hit. And I don't fault her. We all have different seasons of life. Like, I don't fault her for that at all. But because of that, I haven't really used these kind of style of stamps in a long time. And so for me, it was super fun to go back and play with things that are a little bit more, have a little bit more of a whimsical feel. Because a lot of the companies that I work with now have a tendency to be more on the realistic side. So now you guys know I can't leave anything alone, ever. And so I am going to go in and add a little bit of shading. Now you could definitely go in and color these individually, but I wanted my speckling to be my color. So all I'm doing here is going in and adding a little bit of shadow so that they'll have some dimension. And I chose to do that with my gray markers. I'm using the sketch markers, but you certainly could use Copics or whatever alcohol markers you have. It will work as long as you're using the gray markers. And so I just added some shadows to the bottom and then kind of up around the sides. And this is going to give both my large eggs and the small eggs some really good dimension and just make them look more interesting, so that they're not just flat. So I've got this fun little speckle going on in the background. That is my coloring for my Easter eggs. And then this is just the shadows to give the shape, so not such a flat look, just a more three-dimensional look. And I colored all of them the same way. I wanted to show you here, we talk about when I use alcohol markers and stuff, that I tell you all the time that you don't need all the colors. I wanted to show you that you can shade the flower also with grays. You don't need to use other colors. You can get the dimension with the gray markers. Now you may want to err on warm grays if you're using warmer colors, or cool grays if you're using cooler colors. Sometimes the grays, like the cool grays, don't look great with warmer colors. Like they don't necessarily look great with a yellow. But a warmer gray does. And vice versa. So if you use a warmer gray with like a blue, it may not look as good as a cooler gray would have. But you definitely could use this trick, this grays shading trick, to shade other objects or other stamps that you've colored with other mediums, meaning using, ink blending or watercolor. Like you can go in there with your markers, not so much colored pencils, especially if they're wax based. The marker won't stick. The wax coating provides a resist. But anywho, so I'm just doing the same thing. We talk about when we're shading, we add shadows to points where two objects meet and where one lays on top of the other. And that's what I'm doing here. The only exception is a lot of these petals have a dip drawn in them, and so you can see I'm adding a little bit of shadow there to accentuate the dip, and then just give the flower a bit more of a shape is all. That's the purpose of those little triangles that you see up at the top. And then I'm gonna blend that out. This time I went darkest to lightest because I'm just adding in the shadows. I'm not coloring in the whole flower with the grays. I want that stenciling in the background to be the coloring. Now, I'm not going to leave it like this. No, I'm not. I just wanted to show you it was an option. So now that I've added the majority of my shadows with my grays, I'm going to go in and just do some quick color glazing, which you need even less colors for. Like normally if I had colored this flower, I would have used a 4-color blend for the petals. I would have used a 4-color blend for the inside, for the leaves. So what are we up to? 12 markers. And here I'm just going to use a couple because I've already done the shading with the grays. I can just add in these colors on top to glaze the shadows and get the more vibrant look of, the actual color. So I did the orange in the center, and then I'm going to do some pink blended into purple with a little bit of blue, just like I did with the ink blending. So as far as story time, so anyway, so when she reached out to me, I was like, this is super fun. Her stuff is super cute. So if you're not familiar, I will link below for you to go check out the rest of her release as well, and anything else that she has in the store. If you like those kind of fun whimsical sets, this may be a company that you would be interested in seeing. I was super flattered that she reached out to me to see if I wanted to participate. That was very kind of her. So thank you so much for the invite and for having me. I normally put my videos up like mid to later day, just because that is what works for my audience schedule. But also this whole week has been on fire, and I don't mean like in a good way, like that girl is on fire good way. Like, no, like it's burning down. Oh my gosh. My husband's birthday is this weekend. We are having a party. So there are other things that I have to do. Let's go back here. So I don't have the dies for these. And in order to do the design that I wanted to do, I knew I was going to have to fussy cut them out. Some tips for fussy cutting. Make sure you cut them apart. Otherwise, you're going to be fighting the paper when you're trying to cut, hold your piece in your non-dominant hand, your scissors in your dominant hand, and turn the paper with your non-dominant hand for the smoothest cut. Also, something that I wanted to note, you will see with the flowers, I did cut, some of the leaves aren't connected except for by that skinny little stem. I did not try to salvage the stem. I just cut out the leaf. And the reason that I did that is because I knew that I could stamp this onto my background, which was my intention, and still like adhere the leaf on top, and nobody would be any the wiser that they weren't adhered, not from the looks of it anyway. So if you have a piece that is like a bit on the skinnier side, don't be afraid to just cut that piece separate and then just glue them back together. It'll be fine. So anyway, my husband's birthday is this weekend. It's crazy. And I'm still trying to like work a regular work week while we're, planning this party. No, not that he's planning his party. He's not planning his own party. This little bear is super cute, and he comes from the older set, which she very generously sent me because it matched really nicely with the new one, the Exceptional. And so I'm going to stamp him, and then I'm going to stamp him a little pair of bunny ears. I thought that was really, really cute. And I will probably give this card to one of my kids for Easter. But so I'm going to stamp that. And this is also on watercolor paper because for both of these cards, I am going to do just a little bit of a softer watercolor background because that kind of was the vibe that I was giving myself with this speckled painting. And so I'm stamping down the flower as well. You do want to make sure these are nice and dry. Your ink is super dry, and also that you're using a waterproof ink. The one that I used is Hero Arts Intense Black, and that is waterproof as well as safe for alcohol markers. So it's kind of like a win-win for me. For the background on this little bear, I put down some clean water, and then I'm just going to do like a rainbow watercolor background just to kind of fill up the card kind of nicely and match the rainbow eggs that I'm going to have going across the front of the card. When I originally did it, I did not come up high enough. You can see this is too low. You won't be able to see it behind the eggs. And so after I put that down, I then went back in with clean water up at the top. Well, it's the bottom from the way that we're looking at it. And then touched it to those pigments. And then that way I could go in and add more pigment to the clean water, and it would kind of spread out a little bit more organically. So that's what you see me there. And then I'm going to do some spatters. I did the same treatment with the clean water, blotting that up, perfect pearls, and then like the distress color spatters. So the same thing we did for the images, I did for the backgrounds on both cards to get that kind of speckledy look. And then we carried that theme. We just carried it, y'all. We piggybacked that theme through both of these cards all the way. So anywho, he has this birthday coming up. I'm still trying to work like normal. But then, do you ever notice when you're super rushed and you're like, everything is just falling apart? Those are the times when something else will pop up that you completely did not plan and you have absolutely no time for, but there's nothing that you can do but do it. That's what happened to me this week. And so now I have one day left. Today, normally I would work until 5, but I'm going to pick up Peanut from school, get his hair cut, hit the party supply store, and then hit the GFS for any like bulk things I need for this party. Tomorrow, I have 2 videos that I need to create. 2 videos I need to create. I have a birthday cake and possibly cupcakes that I need to make, and I need to make sure that the house gets cleaned. As well as, like your regular everyday childcare, feeding your kids, things like that. There is no way. There is absolutely 0% chance that all of these things get accomplished. What's going to fall off the list, I don't know yet. I am still trying to figure it out, but I am trying my best to accomplish as much as I can. Here, my background was still a little bit wet, and it needed to be completely dry for me to do the lift portion of it to spatter on the clean water and then lift some ink. I did notice that it didn't lift as much as it had previously, and I'm not sure if that's because I heat dried it or not. But I wasn't mad about it. It was okay. It was enough of a difference that you could still tell that I did it. It just wasn't as drastic as it was on the eggs or the flour. Here, I went back and forth about whether or not to color my bear a different color so that it was very clear he was wearing Easter Bunny ears. But ultimately, I didn't really want to bring in another color because this is already a rainbow color card. And so I just opted to color him white as well as the bunny ears white. And so what I'm doing is just, like we talked about before, I'm just adding in the shadows, making sure to leave plenty of white space so he still appears white just with some dimension. So I'm gonna go get Peanut. He is right now, he desperately needs a haircut. It's so bad. But he wants to keep it long on top. I don't know how I feel about this. But it's his hair. So I'm trying to be supportive of however he wants to express himself. But the deal is he can only have the long hair if he brushes it. And just wants the top of it long. So he still wants the sides cut. And I feel like that's an okay compromise that I can probably make. So we are going to do that. And then the party supply store, I use the same one for all of our parties and it works really well. It's a family owned small business that's local. So I'm happy to support them. And so I go get all my things there. I'm sure that they will have things for 30th birthday. If not, I'll just get colors that match and call it a day. So now all of these things have been trimmed out. The background is done. For the edges of these, this is something that I recommend that you do anytime you do fuss cutting, but especially with watercolor paper because it is thicker. That white edge is like glaring. So we want to make sure everything is dry and you're not going to be doing any other watercoloring before you go in with your water-based marker and just color the edges of it. I did notice on some of mine that I did have to go back because I didn't check it from back and front. And because the watercolor paper is thicker, there were some times where the back was saturated, but the front wasn't. Here you can see this is like truly watercolor scratch paper. You can see it. And so then I just glued these down flat right over that background that I had created. And then I did a very poor job. I apologize. A very poor job of showing you me putting the glue on the back of the leaves because I was just like in the zone and getting it done because I told you my whole week is out of control. And so I didn't even realize that I wasn't on screen. But I promise you that before I put the leaves back into place, I did, in fact, put glue on them. And this purple color that I matted it with, like that is my card base, is Passion Flower from Hero Arts. And I thought that it fit really nicely. So now I'm doing the same thing with that black marker and my little eggs. And I will then start adhering them down. Again, I adhered them, words are hard, flat. But because this is watercolor paper and it's a little bit thicker, they do have quite a bit of dimension to them because they're kind of stacked on top of each other. So my game plan was I wanted like 2 in the background and 1 in the front. So I glued down the 2 in the background first, and then I would add glue to the one that would be in the front and then adhered that as well. And then I used the littler eggs like as a border kind of across the front in that same rainbow color. I just think they're super cute. Like I do think that going in and coloring the eggs themselves, like with the patterns on them, would be fun. But to do them, and they have dyes that match these, so you could probably use that or any other egg dye that you have. I think just doing the speckling without any of the additional like drawn in patterns would also be super cute. Or if you were doing like a bird card where you had like a little like nest with eggs in it, the little speckly pattern would be super cute. I just think that it's kind of a fun technique, and it's definitely more whimsical. But I think that sometimes a little whimsy is also, fun and happy and all those things. So here, once I have all my eggs in place, I did go in and put a little shadow underneath them. This is just going to ground them and finish off that bottom portion of my card really nicely. So I went in with a darker gray and then just kind of filled everything else in with a lighter gray. Was happy with the way that that looked. The last little finishing touch that I'm going to do is go in with my white gel pen. I added highlights to my little bear's nose and his eyes, and then I also added highlights to the centers of the flowers. I thought about going in with like more like the clear glitter pen, but I felt like I had enough shimmer in the background and on the image. So I hope that you enjoyed this video and you learned a little something, and maybe you will give this a try. And I do appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will catch you guys on the next video. Bye.